The twin suns of Aravel rose slowly over the silver mountains, casting a golden glow across the alien kingdom. The city's tall crystal towers gleamed as though they had been carved from sunlight itself. Yet despite the beauty, a heavy sadness filled the air. The people moved quietly through the streets, their eyes turned toward the great palace at the center of the capital. Inside, behind walls that seemed both strong and fragile, their beloved princess lay fading. Princess Elira had always been more than a ruler. From her youth, she was known for her kindness and the way she walked among her people without fear or pride. Farmers remembered her kneeling in the dust to help gather crops during lean seasons. Children recalled her laughter as she joined them in their simple games. Even the warriors of Aravel respected her, not just as royalty, but as a leader who carried the burdens of her people as if they were her own. Now, as her health waned, the entire kingdom felt as if the very heart of Aravel was slipping away. The royal healers had tried everything their wisdom could offer. Strange herbs from the high cliffs were crushed into powders. Glowing liquids, drawn from sacred springs, were poured into golden cups, and ancient chants filled the chambers at night. Yet nothing seemed to slow the sickness that drained the princess's strength. Some said it was no ordinary illness, but a curse tied to the ancient crystal that powered the kingdom's protective shield. Without it, their world would be vulnerable to hostile forces beyond the stars. But with it, the royal bloodline paid a silent price. In the high chamber of the palace, Elira rested upon a bed woven of silk and starlight. Her skin was pale, her breathing shallow, yet her eyes still carried the quiet strength that had defined her since childhood. Around her, council members and advisors spoke in hushed tones, their voices weighed with fear. "We cannot let the people lose hope," one whispered. "Already whispers spread in the markets," said another. "If the princess falls, so, too, will the courage of Aravel." "There must be a way," muttered a third, though his words lacked conviction. Outside the chamber, a prophecy was once again being spoken among the citizens. It was an old tale, carved into stone tablets long before the princess was born. It told of a time when the royal line would falter, and an outsider, a stranger from the stars, would come to stand between despair and salvation. Most dismissed it as a legend, a story to comfort frightened children. But now, with their princess dying, people began to wonder if perhaps fate was waiting to reveal itself. Far across the forests of Aravel, another story was unfolding. Daniel was not of this world. He was a human warrior, once part of a mission that had gone terribly wrong. His ship had been struck during a skirmish near uncharted space, and he had fallen through fire and darkness until the escape pod carried him here, to the alien lands he had never heard of before. His armor was dented, his weapons broken, yet his spirit remained unshaken. Daniel was a man who had lived through battles and losses, yet he still carried within him a stubborn will to fight for life. For days he wandered the forests, surviving on strange fruits and streams that glowed faintly beneath the moonlight. He watched the skies, searching for a signal, a chance to return to his people. But nothing came. Instead, he found signs of another civilization. Scouts moving silently, banners marked with symbols he did not recognize. And always, he felt, as though unseen eyes were watching him. It was on the 5th night that the encounter happened. A patrol of alien warriors, their armor shining with silver markings, surrounded him in the forest. Daniel raised his hands slowly, showing he carried no threat. The leader of the patrol studied him with sharp, curious eyes. "You are not of Aravel," the leader said in a language Daniel did not know, yet somehow the sound was translated through the device still strapped to his wrist. "No," Daniel answered simply. "I'm lost." The patrol did not lower their weapons, but there was something in the way they looked at him. Half suspicion, half wonder. One of them whispered about the prophecy. Another insisted he was too plain, too broken to be the one foretold. But in the end, they bound his hands and led him toward the city. Daniel did not resist. He had nowhere else to go, and deep within, he felt a pull he could not explain, as though this strange journey had a purpose greater than survival. As he entered the capital, he saw the sorrow of the people firsthand. Market stalls stood half empty, their owners whispering prayers. Children held on to their mothers, asking when the princess would smile again. Guards at the palace gate stood stiff, but their eyes betrayed unease. When Daniel was brought inside the palace, he finally understood the weight pressing down on this world. The grand hall, once a place of light and music, was quiet as stone. Torches flickered along the walls, but no laughter echoed there. He was led past guards into a chamber heavy with silence. And there, upon the bed of silken light, he saw her, the Yao princess. For a moment, Daniel forgot he was a prisoner. Elira's face, though pale and weak, held a beauty not born of perfection, but of strength and kindness. Her eyes, though tired, lifted toward him, and in that single glance, something passed between them. She saw not a stranger, but a warrior whose spirit had been forged in battles unknown to her people. He saw not just a ruler, but a woman fighting silently against the weight of destiny. The council murmured, uneasy at the sight. "This is the one the prophecy speaks of," one scoffed. "He is too ordinary," said another. "A lost wanderer cannot save our princess." "Yet the timing is no accident," a third said thoughtfully. Elira raised her hand weakly, silencing them all. Her voice was soft, but carried authority. "Leave us," she said. The council obeyed, though reluctantly, leaving Daniel alone in the chamber with the princess. For a long moment, neither spoke. Daniel looked at her, uncertain of what he could possibly say. He was a soldier, not a healer, yet he felt compelled to speak the truth. "I don't know why I'm here," he admitted quietly. "But if there's a way I can help, I will." Elira's lips curved into the faintest smile. "You speak as though fate has guided you," she whispered. "Perhaps it has." The room fell into silence once more, but the air had changed. Somewhere between despair and hope, a fragile bond had been formed. Daniel did not yet know the weight of the journey ahead, and Elira did not yet know the price it would demand. But in that quiet chamber, the first step of destiny had been taken. And outside, the people of Aravel looked toward the palace, unaware that their future had just shifted. The prophecy was no longer a whisper. It had found its beginning in the meeting of two souls from different worlds. The palace of Aravel, though shining with crystal and silver stone, carried an air of sadness that Daniel could not ignore. The grand halls echoed with footsteps, not laughter. Guards stood tall with polished spears, yet their eyes looked tired. Every corridor he passed seemed dim, not because of the twin suns outside, but because of the heavy worry pressing on the people. Daniel followed the alien guards silently, his wrists still bound by glowing bands. He did not fight them. He had no reason to. Inside, he wondered why he had been brought here. Was it only because of the prophecy he had heard whispered on the way? Or was it because the princess herself had seen something in him, something that even he did not understand? When he entered the healing chamber again, Princess Elira was sitting upright, supported by soft pillows. Her attendants moved around her gently, placing bowls of glowing herbs and strange liquids near her side. But when Daniel stepped inside, she lifted her hand, signaling for the attendants to leave. "Unbind him," she said softly. The guards hesitated. One of them bowed. "Your Highness, we cannot." "Unbind him," she repeated, her voice still weak but sharp with command. Reluctantly, the guards obeyed. The glowing bands dissolved, leaving Daniel free. He rubbed his wrist slightly but said nothing. He looked at Elira, unsure how to speak to someone who was both a ruler and a stranger to him. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Then Elira spoke. "You are human," she said, her eyes studying his face as though she had never seen one before. "Yes," Daniel answered simply. "You do not belong to this world, yet you are here," she continued. "And I feel as though fate brought you to me." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. He was a soldier, a wanderer, not someone who believed easily in fate. "I didn't come here by choice," he said. "My ship was damaged. I crashed. I don't even know where my people are now." Illyra's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Sometimes the paths we do not choose lead us where we are needed most." Daniel frowned. "I'm no healer. I can't cure sickness. If your people think I'm meant to save you, they're wrong." Her eyes softened. "Perhaps you are not meant to heal me with medicine. Perhaps you are meant to do something greater." The words lingered in Daniel's mind. He had heard similar voices in the past. Commanders who believed in missions larger than life. Comrades who spoke of causes greater than themselves. But hearing it from her, a princess who looked so fragile and yet so strong in spirit, stirred something in him. The door opened again and a counselor entered. He was tall, dressed in flowing robes marked with golden lines. His face was stern, his eyes sharp. He looked at Daniel with distrust. "Your Highness," the counselor said, bowing slightly. "This outsider is dangerous. He should not be near you. The prophecy is nothing more than old words carved in stone." Illyra raised her hand. "Enough, Lord Veyron. I decide who may stand before me." Veyron frowned but did not argue further. His eyes lingered on Daniel as if warning him silently. Then he turned and left the chamber, his steps echoing against the crystal walls. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Your people don't trust me. They fear what they do not understand," Illyra said calmly. "But I do not fear you." For the next few days, Daniel was allowed to stay within the palace. Though still watched by guards, he was treated with a strange mix of suspicion and respect. The people whispered when he passed, calling him the stranger and the one from the prophecy. Some looked at him with hope, others with doubt. Daniel spent much of his time walking the palace grounds. He watched the alien gardens bloom with flowers that shimmered under the suns, and he studied the strange technology that powered the city. Crystals that glowed with steady light, floating platforms that carried goods across the courtyards. He had seen many worlds, but Aravel held a beauty unlike any other. One evening, Illyra asked him to sit with her in the palace gardens. She was too weak to walk far, but attendants guided her to a seat beneath a silver tree whose branches hung like streams of light. Daniel sat beside her, keeping his voice quiet. "You are not as I expected," she said. "And what did you expect?" he asked. "A warrior from the stars. A hero with fire in his hands. Someone who looked like a figure from legend." She smiled faintly. "Instead, you are simple, worn, human." Daniel chuckled lightly. "Heroes don't look the way stories say. Most of us are just people trying to keep going." Her gaze lingered on him, thoughtful. "Perhaps that is what makes you different. You carry no crown, no burden of duty to my world, and yet I see something in your eyes, a fire that has not gone out even after all you have endured." Daniel did not answer right away. He thought of his past, the battles fought, the comrades lost, the endless struggle that seemed to shape his life. For so long he had fought because it was expected of him, because survival demanded it. But here, sitting beside a dying princess under alien stars, he felt something he had not felt in years. Purpose. Days turned into nights, and Daniel's bond with Illyra grew. They spoke often, sometimes about his world, sometimes about hers. She told him of her childhood, how she once sneaked away from the palace to play with children in the markets. He told her of Earth's oceans, the endless blue waters that stretched farther than sight. She listened with wonder, as if trying to imagine something so vast, but always the shadow of her illness lingered. Some days she could sit and smile, her voice carrying strength. Other days she was too weak even to open her eyes. Daniel watched this with quiet frustration. He wanted to help, but he did not know how. One night, as the moons rose high, Daniel overheard two counselors speaking in the corridor. "The crystal drains her faster each day," one whispered. "Then soon she will be gone," the other replied grimly, "and with her the shield will fail. Our enemies wait beyond the stars. Without her life, we are doomed." Daniel's jaw tightened. He had not known the details before, but now the truth struck him. Elira's life was tied to the very crystal that protected her people. She was dying not only from illness, but because she carried the burden of the entire kingdom's survival. That night, when he saw her again, he asked softly, "Is it true? The crystal is taking your life?" Elira looked away, her silence enough of an answer. After a long pause, she spoke. "It is the duty of the royal bloodline. For centuries, we have kept the shield alive. Without it, the enemies who hunger for our world would already have taken it. If I must give my life so my people can live, then I will." Daniel shook his head. "That's not living. That's sacrifice without choice." She looked at him, her eyes steady. "Every ruler sacrifices something. Mine is only heavier than most." Daniel felt anger and admiration mix inside him. She was brave, but she should not have to face such a fate, alone. He clenched his fists, his soldier's spirit burning again. "Then I'll find a way," he said firmly. "There has to be another path." Elira's lips curved into the faintest smile. "You speak as though you are already part of my people's struggle." "Maybe I am," Daniel said quietly. And though the night was calm beneath the silver tree where they sat, a storm of destiny was forming. Two souls from different worlds had crossed paths, and together they would challenge a fate written long before their meeting. The days in Aravel passed with a strange rhythm for Daniel. Each morning began with whispers about the princess's failing health, and each evening ended with worried prayers rising from the city below the palace. Hope clung to the people like fragile glass ready to shatter at the first blow. Daniel, though an outsider, had become part of this fragile hope. His presence stirred curiosity, suspicion, and quiet expectation. Inside the palace, Daniel spent more and more time with Elira. He was drawn to her strength, the way she endured her suffering without complaint, and the quiet warmth she still carried for her people. She, in turn, found comfort in his honesty and his stubborn refusal to accept her fate as unchangeable. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled through the tall crystal windows, Daniel entered her chamber to find her studying a series of ancient scrolls spread across a table. Her attendants hovered nearby, concerned that she was tiring herself, but she waved them away. "What are you looking at?" Daniel asked, stepping closer. "The writings of the ancients," Elira said softly. Her voice trembled from weakness, but her eyes shone with determination. "They tell of the crystal, its power, and the price it demands. I am searching for answers, though I have read these words many times before." Daniel leaned over the scrolls, though the alien symbols meant nothing to him. "You're hoping to find a way to break the bond?" Her gaze flickered to him, surprised at his bluntness. "Yes, but no ruler before me has succeeded. They all accepted the burden. Perhaps I should too." Daniel shook his head. "Or perhaps it's time for someone to fight it." That evening, Daniel sought out the palace library. Though he could not read the alien language, he asked for help from one of the scholars, a gentle old man who seemed less suspicious of him than the others. The scholar explained that the crystal was buried deep within the mountain beneath the city. It drew its strength from the life force of the royal bloodline, binding itself to them generation after generation. To remove its hold would mean either breaking it or feeding it with another willing soul strong enough to endure its power. Daniel's stomach tightened. The words echoed like a warning. Later, he returned to the garden where Elira waited beneath the silver tree. The air was cool and the soft glow of the moons bathed her pale face. "I think I know why your people call it a curse," Daniel said quietly. Her expression was calm, but her eyes carried sadness. "You overheard the truth." Daniel sat beside her, silent for a moment before speaking again. "There has to be another way. I can't believe your people are trapped in this cycle forever." "You speak as though you could change it," she whispered, almost amused. "But you are only one man from another world." Daniel looked at her directly. "Sometimes one person is enough." Elira fell silent, studying him. For a long moment, neither spoke. The night around them was peaceful, but beneath their words was the weight of a storm yet to come. The next day, Daniel decided to act. He requested to see the council, though many scoffed at the idea of an outsider standing before them. Reluctantly, they agreed, if only to humor the princess. The council chamber was vast, its ceiling high and painted with constellations of the alien sky. 12 counselors sat in a circle, their robes flowing like rivers of color. At the center, Daniel stood tall, feeling every eye upon him. "I know your shield depends on the crystal," Daniel began. His voice was steady, though inside he felt the weight of their judgment. "I know it's killing your princess, but there must be another way to power it. Maybe there's something you've overlooked." Lord Varen, the stern counselor who distrusted him from the start, rose from his seat. "You speak boldly for a stranger who does not understand our history. The crystal has bound itself to the royal bloodline for thousands of years. It cannot be undone." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Where I come from, we don't accept death without a fight. If you keep sacrificing your rulers, sooner or later, there will be no one left to carry your people forward." Murmurs rose among the counselors. Some looked uneasy, while others dismissed his words. But Elira, who had been carried into the chamber to sit upon a throne of silver light, raised her hand. "Let him speak," she commanded softly. Daniel continued, his eyes fixed on the council. "I want to see the crystal myself. If it drains life, then maybe it can be stopped, but I can't do that unless you let me." The council erupted with protests. "Impossible! Blasphemy! The chamber is sacred." But Elira's voice silenced them again. "Perhaps fate has brought him here for this reason. If there is even a chance, we must take it." Varen's eyes narrowed, but he bowed stiffly. "As you wish, Your Highness. But if he fails, his death will be his own." The journey to the crystal chamber began at dawn. Daniel, guided by guards and accompanied by Elira, who insisted on being present despite her weakness, descended into the mountain beneath the city. The tunnels glowed with veins of blue light, pulsing like the heartbeat of the planet itself. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, until even Daniel felt the chill in his bones. At last, they entered a vast cavern. At its center rose the crystal, a towering spire of shimmering blue and silver, its surface alive with energy. The air around it vibrated with power, making Daniel's skin prickle. Elira's breath quickened as she looked at it. Even from a distance, the crystal seemed to pull at her, feeding on her presence. She swayed, and Daniel caught her arm, steadying her. "Stay back," he said firmly. She nodded weakly, her eyes filled with both fear and awe. Daniel stepped closer, to the crystal, feeling its energy press against him like an invisible storm. His vision blurred and whispers filled his mind, voices of rulers past, echoes of sacrifices made through the ages. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to resist. "What do you see?" Elira called faintly. Daniel's voice was rough. "I see the truth. This thing isn't just a power source. It's alive. It's been feeding on you and your family for centuries, and it won't stop until someone makes it." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Daniel turned, his face grim. "It can be reset, but it demands a soul strong enough to take its place. That's why it drains you, because you're bound to it by blood." A heavy silence filled the chamber. Elira's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. "You cannot," she whispered finally. "If it requires sacrifice, then it is. Mine to give, not yours." Daniel shook his head. "No, you're not meant to die like this. You're meant to lead your people, to give them hope, not vanish into a crystal." Her eyes glistened with tears she fought to hold back. "And you? You would give yourself for a world that is not your own?" Daniel's answer was simple, spoken, with the weight of every battle he had ever fought. "If it means saving you and your people, then yes." Elira's heart ached at his words. She had known him only a short time, yet his presence had become a light in her darkest days. The thought of losing him filled her with fear she could not admit aloud. The guards shifted uneasily, unsure whether to stop him or allow fate to unfold. The cavern's glow deepened as though the crystal itself had heard his vow and waited for him to step forward. That night back in the palace, Elira confronted Daniel once more. "You must not do this," she said fiercely, though her voice trembled with weakness. "Your life is your own. My people are my responsibility, not yours." Daniel looked at her, his eyes steady. "I've spent my whole life fighting wars that meant nothing in the end. This is different. This matters." She lowered her gaze, torn between duty and the bond growing between them. Outside, the city lay in uneasy silence. The people did not know yet that their fate rested on the shoulders of a single human warrior and a princess bound by sacrifice. But destiny had already set its course, and soon a choice would have to be made, one that would change Aravel forever. The city of Aravel woke under a pale dawn. The twin suns stretched light across the silver towers, but the people felt no warmth. They whispered in the streets, wondering if their beloved princess would survive another day. Some prayed for a miracle. Others repeated the prophecy of the stranger from the stars, and many looked toward the palace with heavy hearts. Inside the palace walls, Daniel stood before his reflection in the polished crystal of the chamber wall. His armor was battered, his face worn by years of war, but his eyes burned with a fire he had not felt in a long time. He had faced enemies of steel and fire, but this was different. This was not a battle of weapons, but of sacrifice. The memory of the crystal chamber haunted him, the whispers, the energy pressing against his very soul, and the truth that only a living being's essence could reset it. He could still hear the faint voices of rulers past, warning him, daring him, tempting him. But his mind was clear. He would not allow Elira to give her life. That morning, Elira asked to see him in the garden. She was weak, her steps unsteady, but her attendants guided her carefully. The silver tree glowed faintly, its leaves shimmering in the light. Daniel helped her to sit, and for a moment, they simply listened to the breeze moving through the branches. "You have made up your mind," Elira said softly, her eyes fixed on him. Daniel nodded. "I have. The crystal must be reset, and I'll be the one to do it." Her hand trembled as she reached for his. "You cannot. Your life is not mine to take." "It's not about me," Daniel said firmly. "It's about your people, about you. You were meant to lead them. You carry their hope. If you die, they lose everything. If I take your place, they live." Elira shook her head, her voice breaking. "And what of you? You would vanish into the crystal, lost forever. I cannot bear the thought of such a sacrifice from someone who has already lost so much." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I've fought wars for causes I didn't believe in. I've seen comrades die for battles that meant nothing, but this is the first time I feel like my fight has meaning. Maybe this is the reason I survived all those years." Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "Fate is cruel," she whispered. Daniel looked at her with quiet resolve. "Sometimes fate gives us a choice, and I've made mine." Later that day, the council gathered again. The chamber was heavy with tension as Daniel stood at the center. Elira sat upon her throne, pale but regal, her strength visible even through her weakness. The councilors argued fiercely, their voices echoing against the crystal walls. "This is madness," one shouted. "An outsider cannot be trusted with the fate of the shield." "He is not of the royal bloodline," another cried. "The crystal will destroy him." "Better his life than our princess's," muttered a third quietly, though his voice carried guilt. Lord Veyron rose, his face hard. "Your Highness, this man seeks to take what is your duty. The crystal belongs to you alone. To let him sacrifice himself is to break the very order of our world." Elira raised her hand, silencing the chamber. Her gaze swept over the councilors before settling on Daniel. "And what if the order of our world is what dooms us? For centuries we have chained ourselves to this curse. Perhaps it takes someone beyond our bloodline to free us." Murmurs rippled through the council. Some nodded reluctantly, others shook their heads. Veyron's jaw clenched, but he said nothing more. Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady. "I don't ask for your trust, I ask for your chance. Let me do this." If I fail, you lose nothing more than a broken soldier. If I succeed, your princess lives and your world has a future." The chamber fell silent. At last, Illyra whispered, "Then it is decided. Daniel will face the crystal." The night before, the ritual, Daniel found himself walking the palace halls in silence. The moonlight poured through the windows, painting the floors in silver. He thought of Earth, of oceans and skies he might never see again. He thought of comrades whose voices still echoed in his memory. And he thought of Illyra, her quiet strength, her kindness that had touched him in ways no battle ever had. He entered her chamber one last time before the dawn. She was awake, sitting by the window, the moonlight soft against her face. "You should rest," he said gently. "I cannot," she replied. "Tomorrow, you give your life for mine. How can I sleep knowing that?" Daniel sat beside her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he said, "I don't see it that way. I'm not giving my life for yours. I'm giving it for hope, for a people who deserve to live, for a future that deserves to exist. And maybe for the bond we share." Illyra's lips trembled, and for the first time, a tear slipped down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, but Daniel caught her hand gently. "Don't hide your tears," he said softly. "They show your strength." She looked at him, her eyes full of pain and gratitude. "You should have been born here, Daniel. You are more Aravelian than most who carry the blood." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why fate brought me here." For the rest of the night, they sat in silence, two souls from different worlds bound by a choice that would change everything. At dawn, the procession began. The palace bells rang, their deep tones carrying across the city. People gathered in the streets, watching as Daniel and Illyra were led toward the mountain chamber where the crystal awaited. The air was heavy with sorrow and hope, as though the entire world held its breath. The cavern was colder than before, the crystal glowing brighter, as if it sensed what was about to happen. The energy pulsed like a heartbeat, filling the air with a low hum. Daniel stepped forward, his armor stripped away, leaving only simple clothing. He wanted no barrier between himself and the fate he had chosen. Illyra tried to rise to stop him, but her attendants held her gently. "Please," she cried, her voice breaking. "Do not do this." Daniel turned, his eyes meeting hers. "It's the only way." She shook her head desperately. "No, let me be the one. I was born to this duty." Daniel's voice was calm, but it carried a strength that silenced even the crystal's hum. "You were born to lead, not to die. That's the difference." For a moment, the cavern held nothing but silence. Then, with steady steps, Daniel approached the crystal. Its light grew harsher, reaching for him, testing his will. The whispers returned, voices of rulers passed, warning him, mocking him, daring him to continue. He closed his eyes, focusing on the memories that gave him strength. The comrades he had lost, the people he had saved, and the face of the princess who had given him hope again. The energy struck him like fire, but he did not fall. His body shook, his breath caught, but his spirit held firm. Step by step, he reached the heart of the crystal, placing his hands against its surface. The cavern erupted in light. The ground trembled, the air burned, and the crystal's voice roared in his mind. Behind him, Illyra screamed his name. As the light consumed him, Daniel felt his strength draining, yet he pushed forward with everything he had left. His last thought was not of fear, but of peace. For the first time in his life, he knew his battle had meaning. And as the chamber shook, the crystal's power shifted. Its hunger broke. The bond that had chained Illyra for centuries was severed. The last thing Daniel heard was the sound of Illyra's sobs calling out for him as the light swallowed him whole. The cavern of the crystal fell silent. The blinding light faded, the tremors in the stone ceased, and the endless hum that had haunted the chamber for centuries softened into stillness. For the first time in living memory, the mountain was quiet. Princess Illyra, supported by her attendants, stumbled forward with tears streaming down her face. The great crystal, once glowing with hunger, now shimmered gently, its light pure and steady, no longer feeding on her life. But at its core, where Daniel had stood, there was nothing left. Only a faint outline burned into the crystal surface, a reminder of the warrior who had given everything. "No," Illyra whispered, her voice breaking. Her legs gave way, and she fell to her knees, her hands pressed against the cool surface of the crystal as if she could pull him back from within. "Daniel, you cannot be gone. Not like this." The guards and counselors stood in silence, none daring to speak. Even Lord Veyron, so often stern and unyielding, lowered his gaze. The truth was undeniable. The human warrior had fulfilled the prophecy. He had made the ultimate sacrifice. The attendants tried to guide Illyra away, but she refused to move. She stayed there, her forehead resting against the crystal, whispering Daniel's name again and again. Only when dawn's first light filtered through the cavern did she finally rise, her body trembling but her spirit strangely renewed. When Illyra returned to the city, the people gasped in wonder. Her cheeks carried color again. Her steps, though unsteady, no longer faltered from weakness, and her eyes, once dulled by sickness, now gleamed with life. The shield above Aravel shimmered brighter than ever, stronger and steadier, but its strength no longer drained her. News spread like wildfire. "The princess is healed. The stranger from the stars has saved us." The prophecy was true. The people gathered in the great square beneath the palace, shouting Daniel's name, though many had never seen him. He became a legend. In a single day, a hero remembered not for the battles he had won, but for the life he had given. Illyra stood before them, her voice carrying across the square. "People of Aravel," she called, "today we live because of a man who was not of our blood, not of our world. He came to us by chance, yet he gave his life by choice. Daniel, the human warrior, has shown us that courage and compassion know no borders. From this day his name will live in our hearts and in our history." The crowd roared in response, but Illyra's heart ached even as she smiled. Though she lived, a part of her had been lost forever in the crystal chamber. Days turned into weeks, and Illyra's strength returned fully. She began to walk among her people again, to sit with farmers, to listen to children, to stand in council halls without faltering. Yet every night when the palace fell quiet, she would slip into the garden beneath the silver tree, where she and Daniel had once spoken. She would sit there alone, her hand resting on the trunk, and whisper his name to the stars. The council, meanwhile, debated how best to honor the human warrior. Some wanted to carve his likeness into the walls of the palace, others wished to build a monument in the city square. Illyra, however, had a different vision. "He was not a man of statues," she said firmly during one council meeting. "He was a man of action, of sacrifice. Let his memory not be cold stone, but living deeds. Let every act of kindness, every choice of courage, every sacrifice made for others be known as the way of Daniel." The councillors murmured among themselves, but eventually agreed. And so, the way of Daniel was taught to every child of Aravel, not as law but as a principle of life. To put others before oneself, to give meaning to sacrifice, to find strength in compassion. One evening, as Illyra walked through the palace halls, she was approached by the old scholar who had once guided Daniel in the library. His eyes were gentle, his hands trembling with age as he carried a small crystal shard. "This," he said softly, bowing, "was found near the great crystal after the ritual. It carries no power, yet it shines with a light unlike any other. I believe it is his." Illyra took the shard carefully. It glowed faintly in her hands, warm like a heartbeat. She clutched it to her chest, tears filling her eyes once more. "Thank you," she whispered. From that day, she carried the shard with her always, a reminder that though Daniel was gone, a part of him remained by her side. Years passed. Under Illyra's rule, Aravel flourished. Freed from the curse of the crystal, the royal bloodline endured and the shield remained strong. Enemies beyond the stars who had once threatened the world now looked upon Aravel with caution, for they had heard the story of the human who had given his soul to protect it. The people grew braver, kinder, inspired by Daniel's legacy. Songs were sung of him in the marketplaces, Children played games where one would pretend to be the human warrior, standing against impossible odds. Travelers from other worlds came to hear the tale, carrying it far beyond Aravel's skies. Yet, for Illyra, the story was not only legend, it was memory, personal and painful. She ruled with wisdom and strength, but in her private moments, she still thought of the man who had walked into her life and given her a reason to live. She often wondered what he had seen in those final moments, when the crystal consumed him. She hoped it had been peace. On the 10th anniversary of his sacrifice, the people of Aravel gathered in the great square for a ceremony of remembrance. The square was filled with banners not of war but of hope, symbols of stars and silver trees, of unity across worlds. Illyra stood before them, older now, her presence commanding respect. She raised the crystal shard in her hand, its light glowing, softly in the twilight. 10 years have passed, she said, her voice steady. Yet not a day goes by that I do not remember the warrior who saved us. Daniel was not born of Aravel, yet he became its greatest protector. His sacrifice reminds us that courage knows no boundaries, and that hope can come from the most unexpected of places. The crowd bowed their heads in silence, the air heavy with reverence. Then slowly voices rose in unison, chanting his name. Daniel, Daniel, Daniel. The sound carried through the city, up to the mountains and into the skies, as if reaching for the stars themselves. Illyra closed her eyes, clutching the shard close to her heart. For a moment she almost imagined she could hear his voice among the echoes, steady and calm, reminding her that his choice had been worth it. That night, Illyra returned to the garden beneath the silver tree. The moons shone brightly above, the leaves shimmering in their glow. She sat alone as she always did on this night and whispered to the stars, Daniel, your legacy lives. Your name is remembered. And though you are gone, you are not lost. For you live in me and my people, in every act of courage they choose. You are Aravel's eternal light. The breeze stirred the leaves, and the shard in her hand glowed faintly as if in answer. Illyra smiled through her tears, her heart full of both sorrow and strength. And so the wonderful alien princess once dying lived on, not only because of a human warrior's sacrifice, but because his spirit had become part of her world forever.